Hi there, it is Jo from Minerva, and today I'm here to do a sew along of a very special technique, which is this Pin Tuck Honeycomb technique, and this is featured on McCall's 8325. McCall's 8325 has three views, so one view has this honeycomb technique on and another one has pin tucks that run down to the centre, but you can mix and match those, whichever technique that you like to try, with different sleeves. So there is a puff sleeve, a straight sleeve, and there is also a ruffle edge, which is sort of essentially sleeveless, but you just have a little ruffle that's quite deep, that goes right down, sort of about down to where your bra band is. And you can switch in and out those sleeves with this front technique. It's a really easy fit blouse with quite a wide size range. What I mean by that is the sizing isn't particular to one increment each time. So it goes extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, XXL. And that ranges from size 4 up to size 26. But each one is a little bracket. So extra small is 4 to 6. Small is 8 to 10, medium 12 to 14, etc. So there's a lot of ease in this pattern, which you need because you're reducing the fabric width. So you would have to be really accurate if you had a very fitted item and you were taking pinches of fabric out. So it's got quite a lot of ease. The bust fitting is very easy fitting. So if you've got a larger bust, you could move the pattern piece up a little bit and just get more space for a bust fitting, or you could move the pattern down a little bit and have a bit less if you've got a smaller bust. It's quite a swing style. I've shortened mine a little bit because it was a little bit long on me. It's got a facing, a button loop at the back and just a normal hem along the bottom. The fabric that I've chosen is a double gauze because that's one of my favourite fabrics to work with. This is a Rico one, so you've got these sort of ice creamy colours. It's a really lightweight fabric, so you can choose this pattern and make it in lots of different fabrics and you'll get a different look. So you can try something quite firm and you'll get a very structured top and very architectural. All of this will be really nice and crisp, and you maybe have really big puff sleeves if that's what you like, or you can choose the slimmer sleeve version, or you can try cotton lawn, one of our Minerva core range cotton satines. You can also make it in a viscose challis or a light drapey fabric, but then you'll get a really different top. So you'll have a top that's much more flowing, and so these won't be so crisp. They'll just look like sort of soft folds, and that would obviously be really great for the sleeve. So think about your fabric choice. What do you want your overall top to look like at the end? The fabric I've chosen today is more a choice for my sew along technique for showing you really. It's a sateen, it's a stretch sateen, cotton, 57 inches wide. This one's a really bright sort of lipstick red colour, but hopefully I can show you the pattern markings on here, and also you'll get quite a structured item with this, so you'll really see how to form the pin tucks. This comes in lots and lots and lots of different colours, and it's one of our core range fabrics, so it will be available for a long period of time. Now, I've had a real think about how to show you this sew along because I need to mark lots and lots of pin tucks, and ideally, if you're making the garment for yourself, you will want to find out a way to mark the fabric that never shows again, because you have to mark the fabric on the right side. Now, if you mark the fabric on the right side, and I can show you in the video so you can see the lines, then that's going to be a marking that doesn't come out of the final garment. So I'm going to sort of split it into two today. So I'm going to do a sew along with the blouse as you would see it, and I'm going to show you marking tools that will definitely wash away, and you might not quite see the lines on the camera shots. And then after that, I'm going to show you with a marker pen on the fabric, nice thick lines so that you can see the technique as well. I hope that's a good compromise. I really don't want to encourage somebody to use a Sharpie on some fabric and them to get the wrong idea that that's how you mark pin tucks. So hopefully you'll see the way to mark your fabric so that it's definitely washable, and that's the sew along. And then there's a little technique session where I just show you how to make those pin tucks accurately, and I've got permanent lines. The first thing we're going to do is cut out the fabric. It didn't take as much fabric as I thought because the fabric is 57 inches wide. It's it doesn't take up, it says 2 meters, but I didn't use 2 meters of fabric to cut it. I was able to cut the front on the fold, the back isn't cut on the fold, so I could put those next to each other. And then the puff sleeve piece is a little bit bigger, but I chose the smaller one, so it really is a really economical top to make. These are the pieces for McCall's 8325. There is the back, which doesn't need to be cut on the fold, so that's the selvage. There is the front piece that needs to be cut on the fold, and this is the one with all the markings, so I've left the top released so that I can slip under my tracing paper. I've got the sleeve. I haven't done the puff one for this fabric because it's quite a firm fabric, so I've gone for the straight sleeve. There's a side panel that doesn't need to be cut on the fold, a back neck facing and a front facing on the fold. Essentially, this isn't difficult to do. It is time consuming and you do need to mark the fabric carefully. So the first part of the sew along is how to mark the pleats and the little pin tucks so that you can create this effect. If you don't want your marks to show, which you won't because you'll need to be making your pin tuck marks on the front of your fabric, then you need to maybe test some ways in which you're going to do that. So I've used a few different products, and then I'm going to wash this piece of fabric and see which one removes the marks completely so that it won't be shown on the right side. So the first one is this embroidery transfer paper. It marks really easily when I use the serrated wheel, and I get really great marks. That's going to be really clear to see, but I don't know if it washes out properly. This next one is hemline carbon paper, and this is the one I use the most, so I haven't got the packet anymore, but I've tried out this. The only problem with this is I have used it a lot, so I might not get quite the same markings, but it went through really easily with the serrated wheel. The next one is clover tracing paper. This one again you can use with a serrated wheel, or you can draw through it with a pen or a pencil. It's harder to get the print off that one onto your fabric. I've also tried a dressmaking chalk, and I've also tried my favourite dressmaking pencil with the chalk in the end because I can sharpen that and get a really sharp tip. It is blunt at the moment, so it's just making quite thick lines. I'm going to wash this and see which one definitely comes out of my fabric. This is the one that I like, so I'm hoping that this one is going to come out. You'll need to try this out because different fabrics absorb different pigments in different ways. So before you spoil your fabric, just make sure that your markings will be washable. Okay, I've washed my sample, and unfortunately the one that I wanted to use, the embroidery transfer paper, has remained on the fabric. And I guess that's because if you're embroidering, you're covering over those lines, so there's no real need for those to disappear in the wash. The two carbon papers have gone, the clover and the hemline. The yellow and the white I used. Here, this is the tailor's chalk, but the blue pigment has remained. And here is my chalk pencil that I used, and the purple pigment in the chalk has remained in the fabric. So that is why you do a test piece to choose your correct marking tool. So I'm going to use the carbon paper and the serrated wheel because I know that I can use it on the right side and it will wash off. Okay, you need to think how you're going to mark your fabric. So I've used a yellow carbon paper for the dotted lines. I'm using a serrated wheel to transfer that mark through the pattern. You need to be quite accurate. I'm going to use the white carbon paper for the fold lines, and then I've got the yellow for my stitching line. If you don't have carbon paper, then you could put tailor's tacks through to mark the little dots, or you could use your ruler straight onto the fabric, as long as you've checked that your chalk is going to wash out. You can draw straight lines with that as well, or you can make just the dots with the chalk. So you need to find whatever tool you've got that means that you can take that grid shape and transfer it to the fabric. You can also fold the pattern back to get the dots, if that helps. I've tried to show quite a few different techniques there, but really you're trying to transfer that pattern onto the fabric. And let's start with some of these ones here, because I can get them close to the camera and you can see them. So my white lines are a fold line, the solid line from the pattern, and my yellow line is a stitching line. That's my dashed line from the pattern. And I'm going to fold on the white line, the solid line, and pin in place. Now, you can baste along that line if you want, that stitch line, or if you think you can just sew it on your machine, you can go for that. You can always use a different foot on your machine to get the correct seam allowance there, so your tucks are all the same size. Essentially, what you're aiming for is a piece of fabric with a complete series of pin tucks in the top, and then the fabric will flow out from the bottom to make the bottom of the top. And then once we've put all the pin tucks in, basted them, sewn them, pressed them, then we can cut out the actual armhole and neck hole shaping. Before you sew, it's a good idea to run up a couple of bobbins, because this technique uses quite a lot of thread. I'm using the edge of my foot to run along the white fold line, and that's hitting right on the yellow stitching line, so I can sew these straight through the machine without basting. If you're being really accurate, you should see that solid line, or whatever colour you chose for the fold line, right on the top of your pin tuck crease. And your next one and the one the other side will then flip in different directions to make the honeycomb pattern. Okay, radio on, time to sew a row of pin tucks. Here they all are, all sewn, but they need a press. Once they're all pressed, that is going to be the final dimensions of your fabric, and then we can start to fold them and move them into the correct directions. You need to have your fabric all pressed because you're going to lay your pattern piece on top. The upper body pattern piece is a guide, so you need to find the centre line of the pattern piece and match it to the centre line of your fabric, and the stitching line at the bottom is for the bottom line of the bodice. So just get your centre line correct first. You can add bodice length here if you wanted to by moving the pattern up a little bit. Count out the pleats so that you're getting your shoulder points in exactly the same place. Fabric is a little bit stretchy at this point, so you can just adjust it. Pin the rest of the top. Double check that you've got the same amount of pleats on each side of the neck. Now, there's no specific cutting line here, you just need to grade the bottom up to your armhole shape. Cut across the shoulders, and this shapes your top. I've used pinking shears because it meant that my fabric didn't fray while I was handling it, and now I can cut around the neck. I need to mark those shoulder notches so that both shoulders will match to the back shoulder seam. And that is your front bodice shape. Here's my first line of horizontal stitching, second, third, fourth, fifth. I appreciate you can't see those. So I'm just going to show you how the shape forms, and then I'll go back to the sample and I'll show you on there with the darker colours. So starting with the centre, we're going to use the little dots that we transferred from the pattern to put the pin tucks facing in a particular direction. So these ones are going to the centre. It's much easier if you pin vertically. I tried to pin these together like this and I've got in a right mess. So this was the best way. And then we're going to take the next pair and put those together. And the next pair together. And this is where you'll know how accurate your pin tucks are, because if they're overlapping, you have to try and peel them apart a little bit. And if they're spreading apart, you'll have to have a little gap and try and make it the same in between each one. As it happens, these are pretty accurate. And you're going to use that horizontal line as your stitching line. So you're going to stitch through the centres here. So you're going to go through those dots there, along the fabric on the horizontal line, through the dots, along the line, through the dots. You're going to do that all the way along. And you can only pin and sew each line. You can't pin it all and then go and sew it all because there's too many pins in the way. So really you're just manipulating the tucks and folding them in different directions. We'll worry about all that in a moment. We're just going to get this main part into its honeycomb shape. Okay, you might have guessed what's going to happen now. So this time, the next row of dots are going to go in the opposite direction. So this time you're going to pin these so that the tucks go in the opposite direction. We'll pull a little bit. So you do just have to let it sort of lift up off the table. Same again, we're going to use my horizontal line. You might not be able to see it, but I've got my little white dots that I'm aiming for and my horizontal line in between. And the same again. We start on that centre one and it starts to get a little more strong now, especially if you've got a structured fabric, because this will be sort of pulling back on you a little bit, but just pin close to the edge of the tuck. That helps to keep the centres together. Got a mark there and there. That one's coming up a little bit short. Just going to tuck a little bit more in. There we are. You still get that width stretch in the fabric that we have down here, but you'll be having these pleat shapes. Okay, you just keep going. We've got one more row to do along the bottom, and then that will give us these little pleats that kick out for the shaping under the bust. so we can do that. And then we can move up to here, and then we can just start to continue the pattern into that shoulder area. You've got your last horizontal row there, so that will help you to guide this corner as well. On these last rows, to hold these pin tucks down, you just need to stay stitch along the edge so you're inside the seam allowance, round the neck, and then across the other shoulder. Okay, next you're going to see how to make those pin tucks if you weren't quite sure and you couldn't see the lines properly. So this little snippet next will show you how those folds are made and which lines to follow on the pattern. Okay, if you want to be totally sure about the pin tuck technique, here's a sample piece. The solid line is the fold line, the dotted line is the stitching line. So you bring up the fold line and fold it. And the fold line should be a ridge right along the top. And then sew along the stitching line, which is the dotted line. Press and repeat. Okay, this is then made. I've made 3 good ones. I've made 1 poor one, and I want to show you how that impacts the pattern. So when you take the dots from your pattern and bring them together, if you've made them accurately, they should meet in the middle. If you've made them inaccurately, you'll get different spaces. So it's actually quite close down here, but it's quite far apart up here. So your pin tucks need to be really accurate, otherwise they won't work in combination with each other. So we'll just work on this one here. We're going to sew along the line. And then we can flip the next ones in the opposite direction. And these are the horizontal lines of stitching you might not have been able to see on my garment. And then back again to go in, out, in. So I hope this shows the lines. The solid lines are on the top because that's the fold line. The stitching line has been covered over with the stitching. The dots mark the points to match, and the horizontal lines are the stitching lines. Okay, the rest of the top comes together really, really quickly. So let's take a look at how the back is constructed with the button loop and the slit at the back, and also how the side panels work. Next on the pattern, you will be making the back piece. So there is a split down the back marked by a little circle, and that you keep open. And then there is the back notch, and there are a couple of other circles across the other side, therefore adding the ruffle shoulder if you're adding that different sleeve finish. So you'll need to add those. Sew down the centre back seam and press open. Next, there are the side panels. Now these are quite crucial because there's a lot of different notches on here, and you think perhaps, well, I can put that in the side, but you need the side notches because that means you'll get it in the right way round. There's a back notch and a front notch. There are also back and front notch armhole pieces, and you'll need those because they'll match your sleeve, because you don't have an underarm vertical seam for the sleeve, so you'll need those to add the sleeve in later. You've got a double notch, match that up with the double notch on the side panel, and then you just need to take care at this area here. There's a little circle on the pattern, and that shows you where to sew to, and it means you get a smooth armhole shape. You don't want to have a little bit flap of fabric sticking out. Here it is, look. That's where you sew to. I've got my side panels attached, and now it's time to join the top at the shoulders. So just make sure all your pin tucks are lying in the correct direction. So you might put more pins in than you normally would when you're sewing shoulders, just to sandwich all of the layers. At this point, you can also join the side panel to the front, matching the hem, and again paying special attention to that end there. There's a little mark on the pattern to show you how far to sew up. There's also some notches on the side to match, and then your bodice will be one complete vest shape. This top has facings in two sections, so there is a front facing on the fold and two back facings that meet at the slit at the back. You will have your front neck facing, which is on the fold, and your back neck facing, which is in two pieces to accommodate the split. You can interface this fabric if you want to. Just remember, around the front neckline, you've got quite a lot of bulk already with the folds of your fabric. So if you've got a really light fabric like viscose, then definitely interface your pieces. This is quite a firm cotton sateen, so I'm going to just have my facings as the fabric on their own. Press these open so that you get really nice flat areas on the shoulders, so that you don't get too much bulk, because you'll have your shoulder seam as well. I'm just going to understitch that down, and then we can move on to the sleeves. There are three different sleeve options on this pattern. I'm doing the straight sleeves from sleeve B, but if you want to do the puff sleeves, you use a different pattern piece, and then you can add a little elastic casing, or because my fabric was very, very light, then I put 3 rows of shirring in here, so that's a little adaptation you can make. Or you can make the ruffle shoulder, which I will show you in another video. So I'm going to do the flat pin tucks one in another video, and I'll put those sleeves on there so that you see all the full variations of the pattern. The sleeves have a gathered head, so the dots on the sleeve piece are to show where you put your gathering stitches, so between these two notches. You need the front and back notches, so the front is 1 notch, the back is 2 notches. And if you skip that normally because you think, well, I'm just going to ease that shape into the sleeve, you do need those because you don't have an underarm seam, a vertical underarm seam. You've got to put those in that side gusset piece. So those are very important. Okay, let's put the gathering stitches in the sleeve head. Gather up the sleeve head. 2 rows of stitching makes a really neat gather on the head without lots of puckers. You'll have 2 of these, and you can adjust those when you add them in later. Keep the threads nice and long because you will need those, and sew up the side seams of the arms. You can't put these sleeves in flat because of the side panel, so you'll need to put them in the round. Do the same for the other side. Take 1.5 centimetre seam allowance and press. Press them open so that you don't get too much bulk for the hemming. To put the sleeves in, you'll be looking for those notches that we made. And it's a little bit different to normal because you don't have an underarm seam because of this side panel, but you do have those notches that you marked earlier. So with the sleeve right side out and the top inside out, slip your sleeves in, right sides together, and you've got a back notch to match to a back notch, a front notch to match to a front notch, and your sleeve head notch that goes to the shoulder. And then you can ease the rest of the sleeve in. You've got those little places where we sewed up to a dot. So you just need to pay particular attention here that your seam line will join up with the seam from the side panel. So make sure you don't have a little hole under your arm seam. Okay, this is the top. It's very smooth and flat at the back. You've got the gathered sleeve head here. And if you want to think about some of the fitting issues, because you've got size ranges in the same size, then I'm finding that the 12-14 size is the size that I'm having, but the 14 part of that size range is a little bit big in the shoulders. So this length here hung down over my shoulders, so I shortened the shoulders a little bit. So if you're getting, and it's particularly prominent with the puff sleeves, because if you've got puff sleeves drooping off your shoulders, it doesn't look great. So if you're on the smaller end of that size range, maybe more 12 than 14, then you might need to check out a few things like this shoulder length. Definitely the overall length is too long on me, but you can see when I put the place the pattern guide on there, you could alter that a little bit. So if you've got a bigger bust but you want that nice close fitting up here, then you could get the pleats a little bit more into that area. I am feeling like the shoulder seam pulls forward, and that's the same on my gauze one as well. And if I pull it back, then this is too tight here. So I could lengthen the front shoulder piece and shorten the back shoulder piece, and then I would get a more upright shoulder seam. But when you make your first one, you'll definitely want to make it again. It's such a satisfying sew. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. Take a look at the pattern. All the products that I've used are listed below. So I've listed both of the fabrics that I've used, the cotton gauze one and the sateen. Think about what fabric you want. Think about how you'd like those pleats to look and how you'd like the overall shape of your top to look. We have lots of sew-alongs over on our YouTube channel and at Minerva, so you can go and check out those, or you can check out some of my Learn to Sew videos. So if this has been pitched a little bit high for you, but you need to know how to put a neck facing on, you can go and find facings. If you want to find out about hemming, gathering, seams, seam allowances, all of those things are over on our channel. We would love to see what you've been making. We'd love to see if you've made one of these and what fabric you choose. So do make an account with us, share your makes and inspire other Minerva makers. Thank you very much for watching. Do call again soon.